Hi everybody, this is Noelle from Petitti Garden Centers, and we're out in our raspberry row out here, one of our little test gardens, shall we say, that one of our coworkers has here. And raspberries are a really great bramble type of fruit that you can grow at home. And there's some really good reasons for that, is that they're perishable fruit, you know, that they don't last very long in the grocery store and what have you. And you can grow them very, very simply at home and do this. The couple things that you do need for them is they definitely do need 6 hours or more of direct sunlight. So like most of your edibles, they're going to want sun to really produce those flowers, produce those fruits that you really enjoy. The other thing is with raspberries, really well-drained soil is always key. So if you can amend that soil, add some compost, a little bit of compost every season, we'd really love you to do that in the fall. Kind of go ahead and just dig in a couple inches of compost. That's always really, really good. And I should mention that raspberries have a fairly shallow root system, so you don't have to necessarily dig deeply the compost. Just kind of scratch it in or rake it in around the plant material, and they'll be really, really happy about that. Other thing with raspberries is a lot of people think that they're real acidic, like need a high acidity. They really don't. Somewhere between like 5.5 to 6.5. So, you know, really just mild acidity is not a problem with them. And when you feed them, you can use things like holly-tone or berry-tone, of course. And this is a perfect food that has a little bit more acidity to it. So that works really well for the berries as well, the raspberries, blackberries, so forth. So to begin with raspberries, again, in spring, there's a little bit of cleanup that you do want to do. And so you want to get your pruners out, clean them off, and then, of course, look at the plant material. Now, we're always looking for the 3 Ds, okay? So the dead, damaged, or diseased growth. With raspberries, they're pretty darn hardy. They come right out of the ground. They are kind of coming out of a suckering root system, and they grow off those suckers. And what's interesting about raspberries, blackberries, is that they're sort of they're on this 2-year cycle. So the first year are called primocanes or primocanes, and that's usually the vegetative year. If you're familiar with biennials, that's kind of how they work too. So that first year of growth is usually that vegetative growth. So they'll produce leaves and just kind of fill out and look nice and healthy. So the browner kind of burgundy brown stems are the ones that are going to be those primocane stems. And then what happens is they'll kind of die back, and then over the winter kind of go dormant, if you will. And then that second year, those stems become floricanes. And the floricanes are the ones that produce the fruit, okay? There's lots of different types and varieties of raspberries out there, but typically with the reds and yellows, sometimes we have really productive types like Heritage, which would be a typical red everbearing type, or sometimes called fall bearing type, because they'll fruit on the tips of their primocanes, which is kind of cool. So you can harvest those tips, just cut the tip back in the spring, okay? And then leave them to go, and they're in their second year with their floricanes, and they are producing fruit that on that second year would too. So kind of interesting. I don't want to make it confusing for you, so I'm just gonna tell you really what you need to do is remove those 3 Ds in the spring. If you didn't do it in the fall, because lots of times we'll say in the fall, cut the berries or cut the canes that produced your fruit for you. And that's okay, because everything is going to turn out the way that it should. But if you let everything go until the spring, you can actually cut the tips of the berry producers off, and the rest of that cane will produce more berries for you kind of midsummer. So here we go. So what we did earlier is we removed the 3Ds, and it's really, really easy to see the dead canes on this plant. So they have basically grown for 2 years and they are done. They aren't going to produce anything for you. And it's usually the canes that do have berries left over on the top, or that they've turned this really, really white, kind of grayish white color to them. They have really peeling bark, and you'll go down to that base as low as you can go and remove that stem. Now, some of these are very, very brittle, so you'll be able to almost like snap some of the canes as well. Just make a clean cut as best you can, no problem, but you're not hurting the plant at all. Ultimately, when you're removing those old brittle canes, you're basically making space for the new to come up and fill out. You are also creating spaces for air circulation, which is really important through the brambleberries, because more air circulation, the less disease you'll have through the raspberries, and that's really good. They can get mildews, they can get rust, they can get lots of different diseases, so more air circulation, the better. Also, you are creating more sun penetration. So again, the more sun you can get on these guys, the better, okay? I didn't mention about watering. Watering is just going to be your average watering. So 1 inch of water, 1 time per week, thoroughly and deeply is really all they need. They can take a little bit of drought. Again, because they have that shallow root system, we do like to see, again, an inch layer of mulch around these plants. And if you use something like sweet peat or compost to mulch them, that'll make them really, really happy as well, okay? So right here, what we have is we went through and we pruned out all of the dead canes, okay, that had already produced for us. We actually went through, there were just a few little suckers that Taylor will show you that kind of went out of bounds, so we pruned out some suckers as well. And then kind of thinned out the canes to about 6 to 8 canes per plant, per clump. The reason being, again, is to create that air circulation and have nice, healthy canes, really nice and spaced out on this plant, and there's nothing else to obstruct their growth. So they're gonna fill out and do really nicely for us. The last thing that we do with the raspberries is you can actually shorten them. And if you take off the tips, lots of times the tips can be winter damaged or winter killed, so that's fine. You're gonna wanna take them off. But we usually shorten them to about 3 foot or so. And that'll actually push growth or energy back into the base of the plant, so they really do fill out and do a nice job from there. After that, we just go ahead and feed with berry tone around the drip line of the plant. Very common. I've showed you this before with other types of plant material, but basically just sprinkling the fertilizer around the outside drip line where the water drips down from the plant, just lightly scratching it into the surface, and then of course irrigating it in or waiting for the rain to come and water it in for you. Other than that, your raspberries are ready to go for spring and summer development. You do want to try to prune before you get too much growth going. Just helps really promote new growth for that plant. And the other thing is make sure you're feeding your raspberries again. Usually about midsummer, we'll go ahead and we'll put another application of berry tone right around the plant, scratch it and water it in, and you're ready to go.